You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristen Dilley.
My name is Kristen Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristen Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And it is officially the most wonderful time of the year, is it not?
Does that mean Christmas?
I'm going to call it the holiday season, not because I'm all war on Christmassy, but because there's a lot of different holidays. So I'm going to call it the holiday season.
We got a lot of holidays there. We just had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Now we've got, let's see, in no particular order, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa,
yes,
Christmas, Urdu, and New Year's. Oh,
you knew more of them than I did. Yeah.
Oh, I almost forgot winter solstice or
yes,
Festivus for the rest of us.
Festivus. And of course, you forgot probably the holiest holiday of them all during the holiday season, and that would be Black Friday.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I thought you were going to say Boxing Day.
No, but that's a good one, too. You're totally right. Boxing Day.
Do you know the origin of Boxing Day? Of course you do. Not all of our listeners will.
It's the day after Christmas where people would box up their old clothes and toys to give to the poor. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yay. All right. I thought I knew it, but I wasn't sure.
And for you young listeners, no, it has nothing to do with mixed martial arts or anything violent.
And that tends to be more of a British thing, is it not?
It is, at least in my limited experience. Boxing Day is a British tradition.
We were discussing off air a couple of minutes ago the Christmas songs that we both love and hate. And that was quite a spirited discussion.
It was. And actually, that's probably a great bonus episode someday.
Honestly, probably it would be.
Christmas songs we love and hate.
Yes.
That
quite
we
a conversation.
Felt very strongly about in a not so good way.
For various reasons, but mine are all having to do with the fact that I worked in retail for a very long time. And so every time I hear Mariah Carey, I get a sort of hazy red rage that fills my brain as I remember holiday shopping crowds of years past.
When I worked retail many years ago, the most annoying thing about Christmas music was that the Christmas music was played on a tape, and it was a 1 hour loop, and it was the same songs for the entire Christmas season. So you figure there's about 20 songs or so in an hour. The thinking of the management at the retail store where I worked was that customers were typically in and out of the store in an hour. They forgot that for the rest of us who were going to be there for, 10 or 12 hours, the hours were long back then, we'd be hearing the same Christmas songs in the same order over and over again, to the point where if you allowed it to enter your consciousness, you could think to yourself, this is how people lose it. Because you knew that right after Have a Holly Jolly Christmas, which is actually one of my favorites.
Oh, no, I hate that one.
It would be followed by Let It Snow, and then, you can keep naming them. And the system had these multi-track recordings. So it would play a song, and then there'd be a little pause. And if you were actually close to the office where the recordings were, you could actually hear it click. And then it would play the next song. So it would be like you'd hear Have a Holly Jolly Christmas, and then you'd think to yourself, click.
Click.
And then it would play Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow every freaking time. So by the end of the day, if you worked a 12-hour day, you would have heard those songs a dozen times.
Yep.
So that you were just dying to listen to anything but those songs, those 20 songs.
The retail workers of America deserve medals of honor for managing to survive through the holiday season. People who can be very rude and disrespectful. They have a hats off to everybody.
Have a holly jolly Christmas indeed.
Exactly.
We have good cheer to spread, though, don't we?
We do. I am very proud of our 2022 True Crime Holiday Gift Guide. We're thrilled to be able to showcase the work of so many extremely talented true crime writers, content creators, and people who have just put their heart and soul into their work in the true crime space. If you haven't seen it already, before we present to you the True Crime Holiday Gift Guide in podcast form, the gift guide is out there already. It is on our Mind Over Murder Facebook page, and we will put a link to the full entirety of the thing in our show notes so that you can even download it and put it onto your computer, print it out, and take it with you.
If you needed to drop a hint, for example, to a family member, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, significant other, am I forgetting anything? Your kids, here's what I really want for the holidays. There you go. You could even highlight or asterisk or say, here's the book or whatever that I would like for this holiday season. Why not?
I think all of us who are listening, we know what kind of books we're looking for. We know what we like. We know what's good. But there are so many people out there, like my boyfriend or like my parents, who are like, I don't know what to get you. Like, I don't know what you read. And it's, okay, here you go. Here's a ton of items. And we decided to diversify this year. And instead of just doing, here's gifts of books, we came up with two other categories, and that is gifts of service and gifts of experience. And so once we talk a little bit about our book selections, we do want to highlight that there are things that you can give that are not just, here's a wrapped up true crime book that you're going to read and then have it sit on your shelf. There are other ways that you can provide gifts this holiday season.
This is really Kristen's baby. She's kind enough to say we, and then she signs it Kristen and Bill, which is awfully nice, and I appreciate that. But this is really her thing, and the beautiful writing and thoughtful analysis of all of this wonderful media that we're recommending is really Kristen Dilley's work. So hats off to you. I picture you sitting beside your Christmas tree reading about killers and other horrible people. Because, you know, who wouldn't want to do that at Christmas time?
Honestly, and I hold enough stuff back during the year that I can tell my mom, okay, here are 6 books that you could definitely get me. And I've been waiting all year for them. So I purposely hold back. There are things I won't buy myself just to make sure that she can give me something on Christmas that she likes.
You mean your mom wouldn't have run out to the bookstore and immediately chosen A Killer by Design, Murderers, Mindhunters, and My Quest to Decipher the Criminal Mind? You don't think she would have chosen that one?
My mom is a little disturbed by all of this true crime and podcasting stuff. She's very proud. And I absolutely love her. And both she and my stepdad and other members of my family are very sweet, and they wear Mind Over Murder t-shirts, which is just wonderful. And I really appreciate it. But does it have to be crime? Could it be something else?
There's one other thing I want to cover. You told me a story the other day, and I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to tell all of our listeners about this.
Okay.
So I understand that one of your fellow teachers was approached by a fan of Mind Over Murder who was very excited that this teacher actually knew you.
Yeah.
Tell everybody the story now that I put you on the spot.
One of my colleagues had gone to a professional conference the other day, and he stopped me in the hallway and said, Dilly, I have a card for you. I have a business card of somebody that I think you should try to get a hold of. And I said, okay, sure. What for? And he said, this person found out that I teach with you, and they wanted to know if I knew you and if I would pass on that this person is a big fan of your podcast, and can I pass on their business card?
Which they did. They were extremely excited and said, oh my gosh, do you know Kristen Dilley? Or words to that effect.
That's the way that it was told to me. I find that it's very sweet. It's also it's very humbling. It's very sweet. It's a little scary, just a little. But I'm so thankful that my colleague took the chance to give me that person's contact information. I have reached out to them to thank them for their kindness. Nice. Yes. Yeah, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who supports us in various ways, whether that's buying merch or buying things off of the gift guide that we recommend to support the people that we interview. It really does mean a lot to us.
And the most important thing is that all of the folks out there that are listening, we really appreciate all of your support and interest in the podcast. And yes, you get to all say, do you know Kristen Dilley? Oh my gosh.
It felt a little weird, but I'm willing to go with it. We do want to make sure that we point out that everything that is listed here on the gift guide, which we're going to get into in a second, can, of course, be bought at your big box stores and things like that, and from the storehouse of all things, Amazon. But we would encourage you, if you find it within your means to do, support your local small businesses, please. And so if you can buy these books from a local indie bookstore instead of ordering from Amazon, we would suggest that's the route that you go so that we can support small businesses. And we would ask you to remember also that this time of year can be very painful and lonely for those people who are affected by violent crime who are missing their loved ones. So in the spirit of our last episode that we talked about engage with empathy, we do ask that if you are reaching out to the people featured in these books or people who are writing these books, please be compassionate of their stories and to make sure that you engage with empathy with them.
Nicely said, and certainly appropriate. So let's talk about books and other good stuff.
I enjoyed the fact that just about everybody that we had interviewed on the podcast this year reached out in response to my all call and said, ooh, can you promote our books for us? A number of these books are things we've interviewed the authors or we have covered the cases. So the first book that we have on here is one that Bill was talking about a minute ago, and that is the book by Anne Burgess and Stephen Constantine called A Killer by Design, Murderers, Mindhunters, and My Quest to Decipher the Criminal Mind. Bill, I know you're a big fan of David Fincher's massively successful series, Mindhunter, so you are doubtless familiar with the character of Wendy Carr.
I am, and I was a little surprised to find out that there are portions of the Wendy Carr backstory that are completely fictional, which sort of surprised me.
100%. And the real life name of Wendy Carr is Anne Burgess, Dr. Anne Burgess, who worked alongside the original agents of the Behavioral Science Unit back when it was the BSU and not the BAU. And she really worked to help develop the criminal profiling program at Quantico. We were honored to be able to talk to Anne Burgess and her co-author, Stephen Constantine, earlier this year about the great work that they've done on this book, because it is tremendous.
She's a badass. She's one of the old school originators of this area of science, and she's absolutely brilliant. She's very modest about her incredible achievements, but the book is a fascinating overview, and they're working on a new book. This is always a wonderful series. A Killer by Design is a fantastic book and a really wonderful read. Kristen's doing something new this year. She's offering to pair this with, and instead of a wine or other item, she's pairing it with other ideas.
Of other true crime media and various other things. And we also tried to fit in the pair this with component with things that were crafted by people that we know or at least are familiar with. Unfortunately, neither of us know David Fincher. I think that would be completely amazing.
David, if you have time, we'd love to interview you and talk about your work.
100%. But we do recommend that if you are reading A Killer by Design, you do pair it with David Fincher's Mindhunter, which is a great watch on Netflix. You can also pair that with any of the books about the BSU from John Douglas and Mark Olshaker, our good friends. And you can also listen to the Audible presentation of the book, which is read by Gabra Zackman, and that was top-notch. I loved listening to that.
And then we interviewed Anne and Stephen themselves on our Mind Over Murder episode that aired July 18th, 2022.
So if you're looking for that in our back catalog, that's where you can find it. Now, this second book, it is from someone who I know is very near and dear to your heart, Bill, and that is Jane Carson Sandler.
Oh, she's wonderful. Absolutely lovely and an amazing person. And again, just an incredible, dynamic, a good-hearted person. She just embraces you and brings you into her life. And she's just one of these people that not only is she a survivor, she's actually thrived throughout her own life experiences and challenges.
For anyone who doesn't know the name, Jane Carson Sandler is a survivor of the Golden State Killer back when he was known as the East Area Rapist. She's tough as nails, but she is so sweet and so compassionate. And I really enjoyed getting to meet her for the first time at CrimeCon this year. And we ended up having a very good healing conversation for both of us.
Yeah.
And she is just one of the sweetest, loveliest people I think that I've ever met. If you are interested in hearing more about Jane Carson Sandler and her role from the Golden State Killer, her book is called Frozen in Fear, A True Story of Surviving the Shadows of Death by Jane Carson Sandler. And I would recommend that if you are planning on diving down the rabbit hole of GSK, you also check out Michelle McNamara and Paul Haines' groundbreaking book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and the HBO miniseries of that same name, because those are both excellent. And Bill, I know Michelle was someone who was very special to you. The book, I think, means very much as well, too.
And our third book.
The third book is called When a Killer Calls, and we interviewed Mark Olshaker about this book right after it came out. That was one of the books that when we got an offer from the publisher to read it and then interview Mark about it, I jumped up and down a little bit, squealed. I'm so excited by everything that John and Mark write. I would say that probably of all of the many things that they have written, this is one of the best ones for me. Absolutely loved it.
They're both amazing writers, and it was very fun and interesting for us to talk about their writing process and how they structure their stories and how the two of them work together, how they've worked around the challenges of being co-authors in a COVID environment.
Yeah.
And use technology as a way to act as a bridge when they couldn't necessarily see each other as often as they wanted to. Very interesting book, and two amazing chroniclers of true crime and its aftermath.
And even though it's John whose work we see, when we talk to Mark, it's amazing how much he has picked up on his own. Like, Mark is not a trained profiler at all, but he's been given the best possible education that one could ever ask for by working with John Douglas. And so just getting to talk to Mark is a treat, because he can give you probably chapter and verse most of what John could give you. He's got a wonderful teacherly way about him that I really enjoy. So if you are interested in the most recent offering from John Douglas and Mark Olshaker, When a Killer Calls is now out in paperback. I saw it the other day. I didn't buy it because I have a hard copy. But I thought about it. And that does cover the kidnapping and murder of Sherry Smith, which is uniquely horrifying, I think is the best way to put it. That had absolutely on the seat of my chair.
Just an awful case. And we interviewed Mark about the book on February 14th and February 21st, 2022. I was looking at that date and thinking, oh, how romantic of us to run it on Valentine's Day. Maybe we'll come up with a better choice next time.
Maybe. And you can pair this particular selection with just anything that John and Mark have written. Take your pick. You're going to get a great book out of those guys. And just about any choice that you make is going to be a pretty good one.
I'd have to agree. And the Mindhunter name, which of course they coined, that whole series of books, there's not a bad one in the bunch.
One of our very favorite people here at Mind Over Murder is James Fitzgerald. And so he asked us to take the time to talk about his three excellent books, Journey to the Center of the Mind. If you need a really good in-depth deep dive into what it is like to be a profiler, then Fitz has you covered. His books are so thorough and so specific and so thoughtful. You'll feel like you're doing a ride along with Jim.
It's in the third book, am I correct, where he gets into the work that he did on the Unabomb case?
If you want strictly FBI work, then book 3 is where you want to be. But books 1 and 2 about his time serving as a uniformed cop and then working in New York as part of a task force, those are particularly excellent as well. So I say go for all 3 of the books. And I know that right now on his website, he does have some specials up for buying those books. He also has autographed posters. So if you are a James Fitzgerald fan, as we both are, you can buy the books and he will send you an autographed poster to go along with it, which I think is a great deal.
And Fitz is also a podcast.
Yes, he has a wonderful podcast called The Fitz Files. I was actually thrilled and honored to be asked to do a little cameo on Fitz Files. He actually asked me to send in a question for him to answer, which I did. And we did a little back and forth on that. So I'm on Fitz Files for just 5 minutes of an episode, but it was pretty cool 5 minutes.
Totally worth listening just for that 5-minute segment alone.
Oh, completely. And Fitz, of course, he worked very closely with the team from XG Productions and Discovery that brought forward the original drama Manhunt Unabomber. He does work on Audible original presentations with XG Productions, and they put together an absolute doozy of one called Where the Devil Belongs, which is all the way through the start of the Unabomber case to the eventual capture of the Unabomber. Do not miss that one. It's fantastic.
We interviewed Fitz back on June 30th and July 7th, 2022.
We do have actually a couple of episodes that we've done with Fitz. I think we've done 4 total with him, but you'll have to go into year 2 of our back catalog to dig original interviews with Fitz out. Let's see. The next one is called Shadow Man, an elusive psycho killer and the birth of FBI profiling. And this is from Ron Fransal. And this recommendation actually came to us via a listener who had recommended a couple of Ron's books to us and was actually very nice and sent us a package of 3 of them. So when this came out, I thought, this sounds really interesting because it is a section of FBI history that I was unaware of. And it is the story of Howard Teeton and Patrick Mullaney and their profile of the Susie Yeager kidnapping case. I had not heard of that case before. I had not heard of these men before. They actually were the 2 who started the behavioral science unit, like completely and totally started it. And the profiling legends that we know today, Rob Ressler, John Douglas, Judd Ray, they all learned the ropes from Howard Teeton and Patrick Mullaney. The story about the behavioral science unit itself is excellent. When you combine in the story of Susie Yeager and her kidnapping and who actually did it, off the charts suspenseful. It is so well written. You will 100% want to sleep with your lights on for a little bit. Very scary stuff.
So don't read this before you go to bed at night, is what you're saying.
Oh my gosh. No, definitely not. So it's interesting. If you wanted to do a history of the early days of the behavioral science unit, you would start with this one, Shadow Man. You would progress to Anne Burgess's A Killer by Design, and then move on to the first 2 of the Douglas and Olshaker collabs, Mindhunter and Journey into Darkness. And that would actually get you up to speed on early days of the BSU. And then if you were feeling like, really, I'm going to reach for it here, I'll do another one. Look for Robert Ressler's book, Whoever Fights Monsters, as well. And that gives you everything about the early days of the BSU.
And by the way, one of the things we want to be clear here, we're obviously all about supporting small businesses and local independent bookstores. Let's also remember, all of us watching our budgets these days, and many of these books, particularly these classics, are available at your local public library as well. Nothing says you have to go out and buy every single one of these books. We like to support these authors, but these authors would like you to read their books, most importantly. I happen to live next door to a incredible public library. Try to get over there frequently. It's wonderful to go over there and check out a book or sit there and just enjoy the quiet for a while. And a lot of these classics that we're talking about are available. They make fascinating reading. You can even check them out more than once. I know that our local librarians are always happy to see us. They even let us bring Oliver the dog in as long as he's reasonably well behaved. He's not much of a reader, but he does enjoy going wherever we go.
If I had a little bit more patience, I would probably take the time to check these out of the library as well, but I do not have that kind of patience. As soon as I know that there's a book out that I want, I go and buy it. It is probably my worst failing, is that I just can't wait to read. I have to have my hands on it.
There are worse vices, I can say that. You got your drinking and you're smoking and you're gambling and, I don't know, buying books, it's not so bad.
And I have had to explain to my boyfriend several times that it is not hoarding if it's books, it's collecting.
I like it.
She said with 6 bookshelves in her room and 3 in the living room and 2 at school.
And as a matter of fact, I think you added new bookshelves this year.
Maybe.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. So what's next on the list?
We were so thrilled to interview Jamie Gehring. If you want to see how intertwined all of these different stories are, Jamie Gehring is actually a friend of Jim Fitzgerald's, and he spent a lot of time interviewing her for their podcast production, Where the Devil Belongs. Jamie is the neighbor to Ted Kaczynski. She grew up next to him in Montana. So if you want the inside story on what it's like to live next to Ted Kaczynski, have him over for dinner, have him hang outside your house, do unspeakable things to your dog.
It's a fantastic story. And Jamie could not be lovelier. Not only is her story amazing, she's like the nicest person and
oh my gosh,
a great storyteller. And we had a fascinating conversation with her. Book is really good.
And she did just win a couple of nice literary awards for Madman in the Woods. I follow her on Facebook, and she was showing off some trophies the other day. A lot of congratulations there to Jamie. That is well deserved. It is certainly something that we are happy to see happen because it couldn't happen to a nicer person. Honestly, she is just very, very sweet and very upbeat, especially considering that she grew up next to a serial killer. But if you are interested in reading all of the information about the Unabomber, don't just stick with Jim Fitzgerald's Journey to the Center of the Mind. Branch out too and read Jamie's Madman in the Woods, and that way you get the full picture of Kaczynski.
And we interviewed Jamie on Mind Over Murder on June 27th, 2022. It feels like a few weeks ago, but I think it's about 6 months ago now.
Oh, a while. The next person that we're going to talk about is no stranger to the true crime space at all. And she is one of the most plucky, courageous, badass women that we know. And that is Gemma Hoskins, who many of you know her from The Keepers, the big sleeper hit of a couple of years ago. How long ago was it now, Bill? Is it 3 years for The Keepers? 4?
I'll look.
It was a while ago.
Check this out. 5 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
2017.
So it's possible we could have listeners who have never been exposed to The Keepers. If you haven't watched it, you should.
Yeah, it's a wonderful series. And I remember just finding Gemma and her classmates so striking. The story that they tell about sexual abuse at their high school and the lack of response from the Archdiocese of Baltimore. It's shocking, and it's an incredibly compelling television series. You get completely drawn into it. I don't use that expression, edge of my seat, all that often, but that was one of those television series where Pamela, my partner, and I were both just like so drawn into the story. It's amazing. Gemma continues to be an incredible advocate for that group of women.
If you are planning on watching The Keepers, set aside a couple hours, because once you start, you're not going to want to finish until you are done all the way through. Grab a fuzzy blanket and some popcorn, do a rewatch on The Keepers, and then if you are as entranced with Gemma as all of us were, pick up her book. Her book is called Keeping On. It's both funny, like Gemma, and insightful, also like Gemma, and it is poignant in places. And there is a lot of info on Sister Kathy Sesnick's case, and there are even some bombshells in there too. So if you did watch The Keepers and you think Gemma, there is still some information that you don't know. Pick up that book, and she will give you all of the goods on the most recent updates in the Sister Kathy Sesnick case.
And we interviewed Gemma on July 28th and August 4th of this past year. And she's always an amazing, fascinating person to talk to. There's a lot of layers there. At the same time, an extremely funny, self-deprecating thread throughout the entire thing. She's modest to a fault. For someone that is so accomplished and courageous, I think is the right word.
She really is. Our next book choice, it's Trailed, One Woman's Quest to Solve the Shenandoah Murders by our friend Catherine Kate Miles. We were actually just talking about Kate last night when we were interviewing with Laura Richards. This has to be, I think, one of the best of the true crime reads that I read this year. And I read a lot, so I'm not saying that lightly. And I'm imagining you liked it just as well as I did.
I did. Kate's such a wonderful writer. It's very easy to be drawn into this extremely thought out and compelling text. She's a wonderful storyteller. If I had any complaint whatsoever with Trailed, I just wanted it to be longer because it's so beautifully written.
Exactly. So if you're interested in the Julie Williams, Lolly Winans case, they were murdered in 1996 in the Shenandoah National Park. She does get into the cases of other missing and murdered women throughout Virginia. You should definitely pick up Trailed. It is wonderful. There is still, I think, a lot going on behind the scenes that may, I'm hoping, lead to a sequel.
Me too. And she's still doing a lot of great on the case. And she really has turned this into kind of a quest. There's an interesting side note here. There's a fascinating little story about her meeting this fellow, Bill Thomas, at his house in Connecticut. And steps that she took to be safe. She didn't know who I was. While visiting this mystery man and his partner at their isolated farmhouse in Connecticut.
It does sound like the making of a true crime podcast right there.
She did talk about the fact that she had an agreement with her partner that she would text him once she got inside and figured out whether it was a safe place to be. And she said something about going inside the house and the fire was crackling and the dachshund came to greet her and Pamela was making tomato soup and grilled cheese in the kitchen. She relaxed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Figured out this was not any kind of den of iniquity. And she texted her boyfriend and said, I think I'm going to be fine.
I think I'm good. I'm good. For my pair this with recommendation for Trailed is actually something from the gift guide last year. And that is a fascinating book called The Cold Vanish from John Billman. And that talks about just how many disappearances and murders there are in national parks each year. It's a lot and it's scary.
And the cases go largely unreported.
Yeah.
We've talked about this on Mind Over Murder before. I think this is very deliberate on the part of the National Park Service. I know we all love national parks, and I do too. And when I'm traveling, it's always amazing to be able to go to these national parks and appreciate the incredible country that we're lucky enough to live in. At the same time, I feel like the National Park Service doesn't want any kind of bad news about anything that might happen in the parks to get out. And that causes me some concern.
Actually, I don't think even about this because I haven't really shared it with anyone beyond a friend of mine, but a very good friend of mine told me the other day that a friend of hers went missing in Olympic National Park. It was right before Halloween, and she had gone out hiking, didn't reappear when she was supposed to. She has not been found yet, but they did ultimately determine that very likely she had been swept downriver during a rain and had lost her life. There wasn't a ton of coverage on that, and who knows what may contribute to that. Thankfully, it was not anything nefarious. It just happened to be the risk that we take when we go out backpacking. But I remember she was like, they're being pretty quiet about this. There's not a lot of coverage on this.
And we see that a lot, which I find very disturbing.
We could not have any true crime holiday gift guide list without including one or two from, I would say, one of the most prolific authors that we know, and that is Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who is, I don't know how she's written 70 books, but she's just startlingly prolific and also very organized and methodical because I could not do what she has done.
I would add disciplined too, because she just puts out extremely well-written, well-researched books with amazing frequency. And she's also a college professor and consultant, and she's doing a lot of different kinds of interesting work. I can't believe she puts out as many books as she does.
I can't believe she sleeps and does all of this. This is crazy.
I don't think we ever asked her how many hours per night she sleeps, which is probably an interesting question.
She has such a large catalog that we just picked the two most recent things that she's come out with feature on the gift guide. The first is How to Catch a Killer, which is exactly what the name is. It is from a series called Profiles in Crime. That one is particularly interesting, especially if you read it right on the tail end of looking at any of the books on profiling. And then she had a launch for this second title that we put in here while we were at Savannah Crime Expo. And that is her new book, I Scream Man. That is part of her new fiction series featuring protagonist Annie Hunter, who seems to be quite a bit like the good doctor herself.
You think?
And that is just a wonderful book in what I know is going to be a new series. If we know anything about Dr. Ramsland, it's going to be a prolific and long-running series. Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled that we were able to put two of her books on the list. And if you are looking to buy books from Dr. Ramsland, she does have her own website, and it is www.catherine, with an E, ramsland.net. And that has all of her information about all of her books. I would recommend the two pop culture tie-ins of hers that I particularly use. She did write one tying into the CSI series, which is much beloved of me, of course. And then she did write one about the psychology of criminal minds, which is also my other favorite series.
And we interviewed Dr. Ramsland on Mind Over Murder on July 4th and July 11th of 2022.
Yeah, that was a two-parter. We just could not stop talking to her. She was fantastic.
Now, she's an extremely interesting woman and a very fine writer.
So we have 3 books left on the book portion of the holiday gift guide. And of those 3, there are 2 that you actually could read together. And in fact, we recommend that you do read them together because they are 2 sides of the same story. The first book is from Liza Rodman, who we are very much looking forward to interviewing. And the book is called The Babysitter. The premise that I'll put into your head to understand exactly how creepy this book is, imagine if you learned that your beloved childhood babysitter was actually a sadistic psychopath who had been murdering women when he wasn't watching you.
Yee.
That is actually 100% what happened to Liza Rodman. She learned that her childhood babysitter, Tony Costa, who was the handyman at her mother's hotel and also her childhood babysitter, as I said, she learned that he was responsible for murdering and dismembering 4 women in the Truro Woods near Provincetown on the Cape. That just made my skin crawl, just imagining that.
It's an incredible story.
It really is. And the premise just on its own, like I said, it's enough to make your skin crawl. But then when you read Helltown by Casey Sherman, which is the actual ins and outs of the Tony Costa case, if you combine the 2 of them together, like I said, you kind of sleep with the lights on.
Yeah. And Casey's story of Helltown is an incredible read with a little bit more of a literary bent and comes at the Tony Costa story from a completely different perspective. The 2 books complement each other in a very nice way.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to interview Casey back in September. And I did reach out to Liza and say, hey, we would love to have you on the podcast. And she said, absolutely, yes. We will be interviewing Liza as well. But if you're looking for sort of a good combo of books, I would say pick up Babysitter by Liza Rodman and Helltown by Casey Sherman, and then give those as a nice gift with the caveat that you've got to read one to understand the other. Very, very interesting. And then finally, our final book is from an author that we very recently interviewed and with whom I had the great pleasure to spend some time in person in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago. And that is Dan Stashower and his book, American Demon, which is about Elliot Ness and his pursuit of the butcher of Kingsbury Run, the perpetrator of the Cleveland Torso murders.
This is another fascinating story, and there's so much about the Elliot Ness backstory that I did not know. Of course, we all know about the Untouchables and his work in pursuing Al Capone and other well-known criminals in Chicago. I had this incorrect notion that Elliot Ness was affiliated with the FBI when he actually was not.
Yeah.
He's actually a revenue agent, but his work in Chicago overshadowed much of his later career, including the work that he did on this horrific case.
Dan has a real flair. If you listen to the episode, we do talk about it. He's got a real flair for finding good historical crime to dig into. And so this is an excellent book. I would also say that if you're looking for something to pair this book with, do give Dan's other book, The Beautiful Cigar Girl, a try. That is actually, this is not to slight American Demon. I think American Demon's terrific. But Beautiful Cigar Girl is, I think, my favorite of all of Dan's projects. And that is a discussion of the murder of Mary Rogers and how Edgar Allan Poe, yes, that Edgar Allan Poe, actually got involved with trying to solve it. And it is one of those little episodes of literary history that I had no idea about. And then when I learned about it, I was like, I have to integrate this into my teaching somehow. And I have figured out a way. My students don't necessarily think it's as interesting as I do. Hey,
that doesn't matter.
It's Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know how you could possibly be not interested in him.
It's a fantastic story, and Dan is such a wonderful writer that you can't help but get drawn in. So hopefully some of your students will get it when they have a chance to read and study the material.
I hope so. And Dan was good enough, along with Mark Olshaker and their mutual friend, Louis Byard. They zoomed into my classroom a couple of years ago. Mark actually came down in person and worked with my classes on talking about the basics of good writing historical fiction and historical nonfiction. It was wonderful. I know that they had a wonderful time, and my kids absolutely were thrilled to be able to talk with real authors. I'm hoping that they're able to do that again. This is an absolutely fantastic read, so we do recommend that. And that actually brings to an end our list of books, but it is not the end of our list of gifts. And so, Bill, while I take a sip of water, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the ways that you can support Authram through gifts of service.
Gifts of service, these are things, for instance, if you want to give a gift to someone that has everything, or you really can't think of something that they need, these are wonderful ways to salute friends and family. So one of our suggestions might be going to DNAsolves.com, the organization that's run by our friends at Authram, and help fund a case or two in any dollar amount that works for your budget. You can give $5, you can give $5,000. This will allow them to use crowd-funded sources to pay for advanced DNA testing, and these are leading directly to Solves, working with law enforcement agencies throughout North America and now Canada as well. There was a major story that just broke a few days ago about a long-time mystery in Toronto that's just been broken. 2 women were murdered in 1983, and the cases remain unsolved. Authram worked with the Toronto and Ontario police forces, and they just announced an arrest in that case. They're breaking cases all over the country, and it's a great way for a true crime fan to make a positive contribution and help solve cases and fight crime. We think this is a nice way to salute the true crime fan in your life at this time of giving.
Absolutely. Authram actually debuted on their social media pages the other day a fantastic looking sweatshirt that I have decided that I absolutely must have. And it's actually an Authram holiday sweatshirt. So if your workplace has what is becoming fairly traditional ugly sweater party, this is actually designed in the same vein as an ugly sweater. And it's got the Authram logo, it's got DNA helixes, snowflakes, all sorts of great stuff. If you are looking to have a unique ugly sweater that no one else is going to have, do consider going to Authram and buying some of their merchandise. They have a number of different things that you can get. They have the festive sweatshirts. They have enamel camping mugs. They've got nifty keychains. They have all sorts of great stuff. And so you can support the work that they are doing by actually going to their store and buying their merchandise. And so we'll put a link to all of this in our show notes, but you are looking for store.authram.com, and Authram is OTHRAM. That will get you all of the different gifts for the DNA fiend in your life. And finally, our last gift of service that you can buy for someone is something that I think we all need a little bit more of, and that is festive flickering candles around your house. And so we are so happy to be promoting some beautiful, nicely decorated, lovely smelling soy candles from Cold Case Creations, LLC. And when you buy a candle from them, $1 from every item sold is donated to the Cold Case Foundation. And there is an Etsy shop for Cold Case Creations, LLC. And if you go there to buy your candles, you are actively helping to promote cold cases being solved, which I think is a pretty excellent gift in my book.
So from both of us to all of you, we want to wish you a very happy holiday season, and we hope that these gift ideas will inspire you and entertain you. Hopefully you'll have a chance to sit with a warm drink and catch up on all of this true crime goodness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristen Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.